Let the torch of freedom burn.
You find your way to the intersection of faith and the culture. It's WallBuilders Live, and we're looking at all the hot topics of the day from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. We're here with David Barton, America's premier historian and the founder of WallBuilders. Tim Barton's with us, national speaker and pastor and president of WallBuilders. And my name is Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach. Check us out at wallbuilderslive.com, where you can get archives of the program. You can make contributions, which right now are absolutely critical in this time that we're facing. Having a voice of reason about our constitutional responsibilities and our rights is vital. And so if you like what you're hearing on WallBuilders Live, and if you want us to keep bringing you truth from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective, then please check out that donate button there at wallbuilderslive.com and consider making a contribution during these tough times. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, David, Tim, I know of all the Good News Fridays we've had over the years, this may be the one people are looking the most forward to because they need some good news. They've been stuck in their house and they're bored out of their mind, maybe, and or they're dealing with this on the front lines and just could use some encouragement. So thank you guys for Good News Friday always, but I know our listeners are looking forward to your stories today.
Well, I'm going to start with good news that's going to be kind of a second personal privilege, if I can use a little legislative language there. I want to go back for just a little bit and talk about Tom Coburn. Tom Coburn passed away this past weekend, and he was a good friend. He's a friend to every Christian, every constitutionalist, every American patriot. Tom Coburn was in the House. He was in the Senate. Was just a terrific guy. And we talked last week about a lot of the panic that's coming from the corona thing is really in many ways because we become so secular in so many areas. It's not that the numbers are staggering. Oh my gosh, we've had so many pandemics in America with much higher numbers than what we're looking at now. But we've become secular, and as such, looking at Hebrews 2:15 in the Bible, it talks about that when you don't have a relationship with Christ, there's a great fear of death. And that a relationship with Christ takes that fear of death away. And Tom was one of those guys that he's gone through prostate cancer treatments for like a couple of decades, I guess. And he is a guy who his passing is really his graduation. And so all the things he did in America, what he did to help, really, he almost single-handedly cut a lot of the pork barrel items that used to be. Now, there's still a lot of trash that gets thrown into spending, as we saw in this $2 trillion stimulus, if that's what we call it. But he really took away the fact that most senators and reps used to have several $1 million slush fund that they gave to their own personal projects. He got rid of that. What he did to get Article 5 going and get states kind of standing up and saying, hey, there is a separation of powers between state and federal government. We're not all federal entities and the states are separate. I mean, that was big. What he did, the pro-life stuff, he was an OBGYN doctor. And as an OBGYN doctor, he really stood up and started calling out late-term abortions and really what they were and the life of the mother and how that was defined. I mean, he did so much to shape the culture. And so with Tom being graduated to heaven last week, just wanted to give a head nod to him, all he did. What a great guy, great friend, great Christian brother. With that, let's jump over.
Truly, too, David, I mean, a leader in so many ways and inspired a lot of congressmen and senators both to stand up in that way. He set the standard for that. And like you said, I mean, Convention of States and Article 5, great champion of that, really brought that to light and traveled all over the nation championing states standing up for those things. You're right, man. I mean, it's just a great example, and his legacy is going to live on for a long time because he inspired a lot of other leaders to follow suit in that way.
Yeah, he was almost a single-handedly Freedom Caucus by himself. I mean, he managed to do things to reform Congress in ways that the Freedom Caucus has now picked up. But he was really the early pioneer of that, and he did have a lasting impact on all of us. Probably a lot of folks will never know who made those changes, but Tom Coburn did so much. And so, you know, we give him kudos on this side. The Lord will give him rewards on the other side for all the things he did for the kingdom, but really good guy. A couple things to point to as far as good news today in the midst of all the stuff happening with coronavirus. We've seen a lot of things happening where that a lot of the state orders and city orders have affected churches and affected what have gone on in churches. And by the way, our friends at First Liberty and at Alliance Defending Freedom and at Liberty Counsel have been extremely vigorous in being on top of this. And so when there's been orders that have come down that have singled out churches or religious services, they've jumped right on it. And so far, it's been really good to see mayors and others back down and say, oops, I didn't intend that. I didn't mean to go after churches. I just wanted public gatherings in general. And so they've been really pretty good at backing down. We've not seen lawsuits yet, although these guys are happy and eager to file them. If someone's going to use a crisis to intrude on the church, they're going to do that. So they've been really watching after that. But I've seen some churches do some really creative things in the last couple of weeks. There's a church in Ohio that, they were going to respect the social distancing and the calls to have small groups. And so what they did was they went back to old drive-in theater style. They got speakers they could put in the cars. They set a big platform up outside the church in the parking lot. People came in their cars. They gave them an FM receiver, and they had the service on FM, and people could sit in their cars and be part of the service and watch everything that was going on. And so going back to the old drive-in theaters is kind of a fun toss-back on a creative way of doing things. In the community near us, in the town near where the ranch is, actually, the churches got together and rented the drive-in theater over there, and they had drive-in church. All the churches kind of got together, which is good to see churches cooperating and not having the turf wars. It's been really, really fun to see that. One other piece of good news is not only have churches taken the lead on doing some things, and by the way, the pastor we have in our church, he's a cowboy. He was a professional cowboy for years and years, a really noted name. But he's being a cowboy, he's not really been into all the social media stuff. So he decided to do some Facebook Live stuff from church because people just, they're kind of staying home now. And it's really fun to see older pastors doing things they've never done before and step out and use some newer things with older guys. And so that's been fun to kind of watch some of those guys. But I'll point to the governor of Mississippi. Governor of Mississippi stepped in as well, and the governor of Mississippi did his own Facebook Live church service. As the governor of Mississippi, he led in prayer, he led in Bible study. I mean, really cool to see the leader of your state stepping up and saying, hey, for you that can't get out, if you don't have a church to go to and you don't have a church that's online, here, I'll do one for you. So we've seen just a lot of good stuff happening this last week with the innovation of people stepping up and using technology to really step up and keep church going and keep that camaraderie and as the Bible says, don't forsake the assembling yourselves together. Well, we're doing it now with technology, not just in physical presence.
Yeah, and so many churches have responded so quickly and found ways to broadcast their sermons. I saw a hilarious Facebook message from a worship leader friend of mine. He said, if you're wondering how to pray for your pastors during this time, one thing you could pray for is that if they've never done a broadcast, that their video won't turn out to look like a Bin Laden threatening, a Bin Laden hostage video, because they've never done this. The background looks weird. Anyway, they're learning quickly and doing a great job and giving still a sense of community. But I love these drive-in theater examples. What a fun way to get everybody together. The only difference is you can't, get out and go back to the concession stand and get some popcorn while you're at that drive-in theater. Quick break. We'll be right back. We got a lot more good news for you on Good News Friday here on WallBuilders Live. Many of you out there are under stay-at-home orders by your governor or your local health officials, and maybe you're looking for something to do during this time. One of the most important things you can do as a citizen is to make sure that you know your rights, you know when they've been violated, and you're the better prepared to defend and assert them. To do that, you've got to study the Constitution and the history behind it. Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green does exactly that. We take you into the WallBuilders Library, we bring all those resources to life, and then we go out to Philadelphia to Independence Hall, and right there in the room where the Constitution and the Declaration were put together, we bring it to life, we relive it, and we make sure that we as citizens know what our part is in preserving these freedoms for future generations. At this time in our nation, it is so important to know the proper role of government and what we as citizens should be doing at this time. If you haven't done Constitution Alive, check it out at wallbuilders.com. You can get the DVD set there. We'll get it out in the mail to you as soon as we can, and you can study it at home, or you can go to constitutioncoach.com and become a Constitution Coach today. We've got a free license for you right now where you can sign up as a Constitution host and be the catalyst in your community to bring back these biblical and historical and constitutional values. And what you do is you sign up as a host, and then you get your friends and family together on Zoom. We coach you on how to do it, and you're able to create community and also study the Constitution at the same time. Do this, and we will be able to pick up the pieces on the other side of this crisis and rebuild our nation even stronger than it was before. Check it out today at constitutioncoach.com. We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Good News Friday today. Tim Barton's got our next piece of good news. Tim?
All right, guys, there was an article that came out, I believe it was last week, and it's looking at what President Trump has done and how it's impacting kind of nations on the international level. There were 49 pro-life leaders from 16 countries, largely from Latin America, and then Spain was another nation involved as well. But the pro-life leaders wanted to thank President Trump for his leadership and the administration's commitment, is what they're saying, to defend the right to life on the international stage. Now, first of all, this is a huge contrast from where our national leaders have been, at least for the last decade, maybe for several decades. Really on an international scale. You guys, Rick, Dad, y'all probably can speak to this a little better. If there were presidents who, since Roe versus Wade, have defended life on an international level, at least as much as Trump has, or at all, might be significant. I don't know of any necessarily president, back up since Roe versus Wade.
Well, you've got Reagan, who did the Mexico City policy, which defended life at an international level with what we did, and Bush did it also with USAID. But I do not recall a time where that international leaders have thanked a president for being pro-life. Well, and so that's a real change.
Even if you look at like the Mexico City policy, how far did that go beyond Mexico? Because certainly if you look at maybe Canada, Mexico, some of the direct connections, but this is 16 countries, and the countries that signed this letter were Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Chile, Bolivia, Uruguay, and Spain. So certainly in my lifetime, right, since Reagan coming forward, I've never heard of a president doing something on an international level that's, South America, impacting that many nations in these Latin countries. This is a really big deal that we have, right? What so many people thought, seemingly one of the most secular presidents we've ever had, who has turned out to be so good on so many issues. And we've talked about this so many times in this program, how President Trump has so pleasantly surprised us in so many areas. And at this point, really, it's not as much of a surprise because we've seen him do it for several years. But this is just very unique that, as you mentioned, certainly we've not seen international nations come out and thank a president of the United States for taking pro-life positions. And actually what's interesting is even some of these nations that thanked him were present during the March for Life in Washington, D.C. They flew up to be part of the March for Life, which President Trump, right, spoke at. And so there's just a lot of unique things in the midst of right now, so much of the shutdown, so much of the shelter in place. What we see generally chaotic things around the nation, and I guess really more specifically around the world, to see that there are still some victories happening, and this time the pro-life circle, and I'll come back to pro-life things in a minute. One thing I want to point out, there was a survey that came out where the survey wanted to know, and this is from philanthropy.com, but they wanted to know how people felt about nonprofits. And in this time when so much of the nation seems to be looking to government, we know that so many nonprofits have stepped up in so many ways, and now so many organizations. We talked last week about how many organizations were hiring people in what looked like this down economy, and how many positive things were happening from grocery stores and from the trucking industry. And right, we can go down the list. There's a lot of good things that were happening in the nation, but nonprofits certainly have played a very significant role in helping people in need and stepping up to the plate. And so the survey went out asking people, how do you feel about nonprofits? And 60% of those polled said they trust nonprofits' response to the pandemic either a lot or, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, right? It's like the 4 or 5. A lot or kind of a lot, right? Like kind of up in the top level. What's interesting about this, comparing the nonprofits, is then they then asked, well, how do you think your local government is doing? Local government, 57% of people said they trusted local government a lot or some. And then they were asked, how do you feel the federal government is doing? Federal government was the lowest of the three at 49%. And what they point out is, based on this survey, this is a really good time for nonprofits because people are recognizing that nonprofits are doing things of value and are helping people in need. And as much as we have built a dependency in America to look to the government to solve problems, the fact that people are recognizing, nope, in this time, nonprofits, we trust them more to do the right thing than we trust our local government, and certainly more than we trust the federal government. So it is encouraging that even though we don't want to be in a place that we don't trust our federal government, that at least we don't rely on them to solve problems. Dad, you and I were talking even before the show about how there's so many silly things happening where people are calling 911 when they run out of toilet paper.
And what kind of reliance on government have you developed when you run out of toilet paper and call government at 911?
And yeah, you think
Are
the police?
kidding?
Yeah, you think the police's job is to bring you more toilet paper? Like, it's a kind of a silly place that we have come to depend on somebody else to help meet our needs that much. So certainly our reliance.
New meaning of nanny state for sure.
Oh yeah, certainly our reliance on the government on that level is not good. But again, recognizing that people now are trusting nonprofits to do what's right more than they are the government. We've talked about how there could be a shift in our nation in a lot of areas, and one of the shifts could be that people get back to a little more sovereignty, individual responsibility, state sovereignty. And so this survey seems to indicate that at least for some level on the nonprofit world, it's a really good statement that people are not thinking that government is the best one to solve all these problems.
All right, guys, quick break. We'll be right back. We've got more good news for folks out there, so stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. Hey friends, it's Rick Green from WallBuilders Live, and I have had so many requests about what in the world can we be studying at home right now. You know, I got the kids at home. They're normally in school, or if you homeschool, you're looking for additional material. One Room Schoolhouse. It is a great new series WallBuilders is putting out where you literally get a tour of the WallBuilders library as Tim Barton and Jonathan Ritchie bring history to life. There's a couple of resources on this. You can go to YouTube and search for WallBuilders and look for One Room Schoolhouse. You can go to our Facebook page and get it right there on Facebook as we do it live each Monday and sometimes additional days from there. And then you can also just go to wallbuilders.com. Scroll down to the bottom and we'll be posting the videos as they come out. This is such a great way to learn and a great way for you to share with others. Gather the family around, watch the One Room Schoolhouse, and learn some great history. It'll be vitally important to restoring our nation and bringing back these principles that made America great in the first place. Check it out, One Room Schoolhouse at wallbuilders.com. We're back on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us on this Good News Friday. David Barton's got the next piece of good news for today.
Well, we were talking last week that it looks like there's about 20 different vaccines that are being developed across the world. A lot of them will take some months to go through testing, et cetera, to get there. But at the same time, some of them are combinations of existing drugs that are out there. And one of the promising combinations has been that of combining malaria-treating drugs with some common antibiotics. So those two together seem to work really well. And so those tests have done real well in Israel. Israel has helped other nations with those, and they're seeing that where they use this malaria drug that's manufactured in Israel, where they use that malaria drug with common antibiotics, that is cutting the coronavirus down from 11 days down to 6. And I think 11 is the last number I saw on the average length of the run, but it's down to 6 now, which is really good. And so here's what Israel has done. Israel, for free, has sent the United States 6 million anti-malaria tablets in the month of March, and they're sending another 4 million in April. So you have Israel reaching out and saying, hey, guys, we just want to help. We just appreciate the relationship with you guys. Here, have 10 million anti-malaria tablets as part of the corona treatment. So, I mean, Tim, you just mentioned the fact that you've got all these international leaders saying thanks to President Trump for what you've done with pro-life. Well, here's international nations saying, hey, we just want to help you guys. We appreciate the relationship with you. So that's good. The other piece of good news I've got is this thing that, and President Trump was talking about it last week, but here's an article on it, where that they are now kind of retooling some of the car manufacturing plants to make ventilators that are needed in hospitals. And the headline says that the FDA has dropped a lot of the regulations to allow this to happen. Well, if it can happen without the regulations, why do we need the regulations?
That's right. That's right.
And I hope that that's one of the things that comes out of this, is that we're figuring out that, if you get government out of the way, private industry is stepping up a lot faster.
And remember, that's something that we've talked about before, too, how well President Trump has done helping get so many of those regulations out of the way. And now that the American people are maybe seeing even more of that, I don't think President Trump necessarily needs the encouragement to do more to deregulate, but he probably could do more if he had the support of the American people, because now, even if the media is going to bash you for doing something that is very good, if the people are recognizing what the media says is dumb on an even greater level, which...
And by the way, speaking of what the media says is dumb, we've gone from Trump causing the coronavirus to the headlines I saw this morning are Christians are the ones who caused the coronavirus. So just dumb on several levels.
Yeah, we've seen some of those attacks this week, and you're right, it is dumb. But one of the other pieces of good news, I don't have the article in front of me, but this is something you can look up, is President Trump's approval rating has gone up in the midst of this pandemic, and the media's ratings have just continued to tank, where way more people now trust the president than trust the media. And so, again, I mean, there's a lot of what we would say positive things. And as you mentioned, if we can help continue to get some of these regulations out of the way, which the more that the American people recognize how much these regulations have slowed us down, the easier it will be for President Trump to continue to encourage the deregulation in so many of these industries that don't need that many regulations.
All right, guys, quick break. We'll be right back for our final piece of good news for the day. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
Hi, this is David Barton. I want to let you know about a brand new book we have out called This Precarious Moment: 6 Urgent Steps That Will Save You, Your Family, and Our Country. Jim Garlow and I have co-authored this book, and we take 6 issues that are hot in the culture right now, issues that we're dealing with, issues such as immigration and race relations and our relationship with Israel and the rising generation millennials and the absence of the church and the culture wars and where American heritage is, our godly heritage. We look at all 6 of those issues right now that are under attack, and we give you both biblical and historical perspective on those issues that provide solutions on what each of us can do right now to make a difference. These are all problems that are solvable if we'll get involved. So you can grab the book, This Precarious Moment, and find out what you can do to make a difference. This Precarious Moment is available at WallBuilders.com.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us on this Good News Friday. And there is more good news on our website. There's a lot of good things happening in the country. And so let's get our final piece for today, but make sure you stay tuned to WallBuilders Live throughout the week, because we're one of those optimistic programs. So even in the storm, there's a lot of bright spots to look at. Tim, you're taking us out today with the last piece of good news.
All right, guys, one of the pieces of good news is coming on the state level at so many states, and I printed off several articles. There are many more states than what I have printed. But one of the things we know is that states have determined that non-essential medical procedures should not take place in the midst of this crisis. One of the non-essential medical procedures that was determined that should not continue is abortion. So many states have determined that, nope, we're closing down the abortion facilities right now because that's a non-essential service. That is a really interesting position, because as a pro-life person, I'll take the victory however we can get it. Right now, I would say this is always a non-essential service to speak of, because the only time you could argue it's essential is if it's in the defense of the life of the mother. But we've had medical professionals on before who will point out that the way you save the life of the mother is not to kill the child. You prioritize, we have to save the mother's life first, because if we don't save the mother, we can't save the baby. And if in saving the mother, you lose the baby, that's not what you were trying to do. You were trying to save both lives. You just saved the mother's first and then the baby. But nonetheless, there are many states that have closed down abortion facilities. And so among the list I have in my hand in front of me, Louisiana and Texas were some of the early states to do it. Idaho, this headline says, Idaho governor signs bill banning abortions. He said abortion is not health care. Then you have Mississippi, and Dad, I think you pointed out Mississippi. The governor, Tate Reeves, was the one who also did the Bible study. So probably not surprising coming from Mississippi that he's going to say that they're going to stop abortion, although this was really interesting in this article. It says Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves urged the state's only abortion facility to close and comply with a state order postponing all elective medical procedures due to the coronavirus. I had no idea that Mississippi only had one, and we've had so many good news programs. Maybe we talked about that at one point, but Mississippi doing incredible things in the pro-life movement. This is the one that was the most surprising, though. Maryland orders abortion clinics to close during coronavirus crisis.
Super blue Maryland.
Yeah, you would expect maybe some of this coming from a conservative governor in a conservative state.
Like a Mississippi.
Not from Maryland. And a shout out goes to Dan Cox, who is a pro-life state rep there in Maryland. And he put out a request and the Maryland Department of Health. And he said, hey, can we follow some of these other states who have made some of these decisions? He mentions Ohio, Texas, and Louisiana to halt elective abortion surgeries. Department of Health from Maryland replies back and essentially tells them it's a good idea. And then Maryland decides they're going to shut down abortion because that is a non-essential procedure. So just really good news on the pro-life front in the midst of this craziness.
Well, David, Tim, thanks for so much good news today. I know folks are excited to be able to hear some of that good news during these difficult times. And, as we said here on WallBuilders Live when this all first started was, hey, first of all, we're not going to have a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. We know that God is faithful, and we know that there are solutions to these problems, and that no matter how big the challenges are, we know who has control. And that we need to be, logical during these times. We need to be reasonable and looking at these things from that biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective, while looking at the good news, looking at all these things eyes wide open, and looking for ways to hold our elected officials accountable and encourage them to follow the Constitution, the federal Constitution, and also our state constitutions and our local ordinances, and make sure that we're not overreaching in government, which we do see a lot of right now across the country, but that we're maintaining a rational perspective and we're protecting liberty at the same time. There is a way to do this in a very balanced way. We could use your help in spreading the word. If you would take these programs that you're hearing on WallBuilders Live and share them with your friends and family through social media and let people know this is a source of truth and just a great way to look at the issues of the day, all of the issues of the day, but specifically right now, what we're facing with the coronavirus. So let's make sure that we're holding, again, ourselves accountable and our elected officials accountable, that we're doing the smart things and the right things, that we're governing ourselves, as Representative Matt Krause shared with us last week, and then at the same time making sure that we're holding our public servants accountable to a rational response to all that is taking place. One of the things you can do is go to our website today at wallbuilderslive.com. You can make a contribution to our radio program. That certainly helps us to continue bringing this truth and these good messages. You can also, at wallbuilderslive.com, get archives of the program over the last few weeks. While you got some extra time on your hands, study up, get listen to some of those programs. Go to wallbuilders.com, get some of our curriculum programs and other things that you would normally do in a Sunday school class. Do them at home with your friends and family. Go to constitutioncoach.com and sign up to be one of our Constitution coaches and get your friends and family on Zoom with you and have some good community studying where we came from as a nation and how to restore it. Folks, we're going to have some difficult times ahead. We got to make sure we are prepared with truth to pick up the pieces and rebuild in a positive way and come out of this thing stronger in the end. We can do that if we stick to those principles. So learn what those principles are. Take our Constitution Alive class. Share it with your friends and family. Go to constitutioncoach.com today to find out how to do that. Thanks so much for listening. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided, forever